Welcome to our Teen and Tween Craft Time. I'm Miss Carla and I work for the St. Johns County Public Library System. Today we are sewing a dog toy, and you're going to build on your sewing skills, and part of that is going to be working on sewing curves. And that is going to be a little bit more advanced and a little bit harder to do than a straight seam. But since this is a toy for your dog's not going to care if it's a little bit crooked or whatnot. So if you picked up a kit at your local library, you should have 2 pieces of this black and white fabric. These are little dog prints, and you're going to have a pattern piece, and you're going to have some fiber fill stuffing. What you're going to need in addition to what's in the kit is a sewing machine and some pins and some scissors, and you're going to need a hand sewing needle. Let me grab one. So you will need a hand sewing needle, and if you don't have a kit from the library, if you go online, or you can just freehand this if you want to. You're just kind of making a dog bone shape like this. Just kind of draw that. And the fabric that I have is 5 by 9 inches. And you can make yours bigger or smaller. That would totally be up to you. And let's go ahead and get started with the sewing part. So first, we're going to take this pattern piece, and one of the things that we're going to do is put our right sides together. So the dark side is on the inside and the whitish gray side is on the outside. We're going to take our pattern piece and we're going to pin it down. And I want to make sure that my pins are not right on the lines. I'm going to move that one a little bit. Okay, so once you have that pin down, I'm going to put one more. We're going to take our scissors, and it doesn't really matter where you start, but we're going to go around and we're going to cut on that pattern piece line. Try to keep to the outside edge of the line as you're cutting, but remember, this is for your dog, and if you make a little bit of a mistake, it's not going to matter. So here we go, and I'm kind of, normally the way that you cut is you kind of put your hand down like this, and you kind of hold that down, and this curve is a little awkward, but normally the way that you cut when you're cutting like a pattern piece out, if you're making a dress or something, is you keep your hands kind of firmly as you're cutting. But on this curve, and because I'm trying to show it to you on the camera, I'm not doing it that way, but keep that in mind, is that's if you're cutting long straight pieces, you would do it that way. And yours is probably going to look neater than mine because I'm trying to do this pretty quickly. Now, on the pattern piece where I'm cutting just right now, there are 2 little lines, and that will stay on there, but we're going to be paying attention to those in just a minute. All right, so I have that cut out, and before I remove my pattern piece, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to take a pin out there, and I'm going to put a pin where that one of those little lines is that says to stop here. If you're doing this at home, all we're doing is marking a 2-inch opening for when we turn this right side out, so I'm putting another one where that little line is. I'm going to put a pin right there. I'm probably going to pin this to the tablecloth. Here we go. Now I'm going to do one thing that's a little bit different, and I am actually going to put a pin in between those two pins because that's going to really help me remember not to sew in between those two pins. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this piece so that you can see it better. So over here at the opening, I have two pins that are 2 inches apart, and I've put a pin in between so that I remember that that's where I'm not sewing. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and put a few pins around these curves to hold them together. Your fabric is going to move on you a little bit as you sew around those curves. Okay, now I'm going to move over to the sewing machine. Okay. Now we're going to start sewing. So here I have started at one of my pins of the 2 inches. I'm going to start in the one in the front, and I'm going to make sure that my take-up lever is up at the top, and it's going to be a 1/4 of an inch seam, and on my sewing machine this little piece right here is right at a 1/4 of an inch. Also kind of so just pick out what on your machine can help you do a 1/4 of an inch. There's also a presser foot that is a 1/4 of an inch. Presser foot that if you're going to be sewing a lot of things with small seams, you might want to get one of those. But for today, I'm just going to use my regular presser foot. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to go ahead and start it by hand here with my lever there. And then I'm going to take this pin out and I'm going to back stitch just a stitch or two, because when we go to do our stuffing, there's going to be a lot of pressure on that opening. Okay, so here we go. Okay, I think I'm about a 1/4 of an inch on that curve. I'm going to turn that around. And it's really hard to do this perfectly, so don't worry. Just go slowly. This is not something you can do fast. Okay, I'm getting near the end, and I've got this last pin here, and I've marked where that was. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that last little bit. I'm going to kind of move that around. Okay, I'm going to come down to that pin that marked my opening. I'm going to sew right up to it, and then I'm going to back stitch, and that is the end of the sewing part. So I'm going to go ahead and take that up and cut my threads. Okay, let's finish up our dog toy project. So what you're going to do now that you have this sewn together is you need to clip these curves on your dog bone. Let's see, go ahead, and this is not the way that you would do it. Make sure that you don't cut up past your stitching line, because then you'd have a hole in your dog toy. But of course your dog's probably going to do that pretty quick anyway, but that's okay. So we're going to it here, and I'm going to try to be really careful so that I don't cut the cloth, but this is the way you would do it at home. A smaller pair of scissors, if you have a good small pair, might even be nice until you get used to doing this. Okay, so once you have all those curves clipped, what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your opening and you're going to turn it out. So here we go. So I've got that one, that side, and kind of turn that. And you can continue to do that at home. What I'm going to do now is this one is already turned the right side out, and I'm going to go ahead and once you're going to want to take your chopstick or your crochet hook or whatever you have, you're going to push those curves up and around to make them nice and straight. That's why you clip the curves, so that you would be able to do this. And again, this is a learning process, and this is just a nice little project to help you learn something about sewing curves and turning them inside out and clipping. So this is my fiber fill, and I've kind of pulled it apart a little bit just to make it a little fluffy. And what I need to do is I need to push it up in the ends first, and you can take that. If you want to, you can take your tool that you use for pushing the corners out and push up in those corners. You don't have to do this really tight, but this is something that's not going to matter that much. Just do the best that you can. I'm going to keep pushing up in there. Push my fiber fill up with my tool. I'm going to go over to the other side. Okay, and now I have this filled, and there's one more thing to do, and that is I need to sew my opening closed. So here I have a needle and thread, and on my dog bone you can see that there is an opening, and the fabric where our stitching was is kind of already naturally turning under that 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go up and under where that fabric is folded near where I ended my machine stitching, and I'm going to take from the inside out. I'm going to put that needle up and through so that my knot is on the inside. Let's see, try that again. Okay. And then I'm going to come up over, and I'm going to take a little bit of the fabric from the other 1/4 of an inch, kind of like when you do a hem, if you've ever done that. And then go back over to the other side. I'll need to cut off my ends there in a little bit. And go back over to the other side, take a little bit of that 1/4 of an inch that you've got sticking there and go through it. Go back over to the other side and do the same thing. Okay. So again, take a little bit of that seam, and it's kind of hard to see when you're trying to do it fast, but just keep going and stitching a little bit of that 1/4 of an inch seam on both sides, just catching a little bit. And that's going to close that stitching up. I'm just going to, for the rest of this, now that's the right way to do it. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, and you can do it this way because it's just a dog toy, and just go through and hold it together and stitch over the top. What I showed you at first was what's called a ladder stitch, and if you're doing something that matters, you probably want to do a ladder stitch, but for this toy, to speed it up, I'm just going to go through and do it this way really quickly. All right, so again, if you were doing a ladder stitch, you catch a little bit of that on each side, on that side, and you go over to the other side of that 1/4 of an inch seam, and you take a little bit of that fabric, and that will make a nice neat stitch. Or you can just do an over stitch like I did, but when you do that you can see the stitching. You probably can't see that on the camera, but when you get to the end, you're going to go underneath, go through your toy, and then go through that center stitching and just kind of bring your needle up like that, and just cut off your thread, and we have a dog toy. And thank you so much for joining us today at the library, but I especially want to thank our friends of the library who provided the funds for our craft today. And we'll see you again next time.